Howdy, I'm Rose Fatal and I have some shockingly bad news. I'm sad to report that recycling garbage has recently become effectively useless in much of the world. Most recyclables around the world are now ending up in landfills, getting burned, or simply dumped into the ocean, instead of being processed for reuse. If you're from North America, Europe, that means you too, Britain, Australia, Japan, and any other developed country, this directly affects you. In this video, I'll discuss what led to this situation. I always assumed that recyclables dropped into the correct bins were easily processed at local facilities. Instead, they are shipped halfway around the world. Since 1992, most of the world's wealthiest nations exported more than half their plastic waste, 106 million metric tons, via giant ships to China for processing. Prior to China's involvement, recycling waste was fairly expensive in most parts of the world. During the 1980s, China's economy began opening up as it started manufacturing a lot of the world's goods. These items were then transported via large cargo ships to other countries. For the return journey, Chinese businesses arranged for these now empty ships to be filled with inexpensive recyclables and shipped back to China. This proved to be a very cost-effective solution for many countries wanting to get rid of their waste. Meanwhile, China gained access to high-quality recyclables and turned them into new items to sell. In short, it was a mutually beneficial relationship. In many countries, all recyclables are placed into a single container for collection. This is known as single-stream recycling. Once it's collected, it is sorted out in material recycling facilities, MRFs. Paper products, metals, and certain plastics are separated by machine. Trash is hand-picked and disposed of. Once separated, the different materials are sent off to processing facilities. Single-stream recycling primarily focuses on the quantity rather than the quality, which can be very problematic for MRFs. Non-recyclable material often ends up in recycling containers.
This one's gross, this is just regular trash.
All from curbside recycling bins.
They don't usually have enough workers to thoroughly separate all the materials. This often leads to bales of recycled material being contaminated. Those bales are then sent off to China, where brokers would sell them to local businesses that will reprocess the material. The electronics would head to Guiyu, known for being the largest e-waste site. Meanwhile, plastic material is sent to Wen'an, the heart of the global scrap plastics trade. It is in these regions where many small-scale workshops do much of the actual recycling. The workshops are usually run by families of uneducated, unskilled villagers who live on site. They receive low wages while working in dangerous conditions. The lack of regulation leads to all forms of extreme pollution, such as discharging untreated acidic wastewater directly into the rivers. In these areas, cancer rates are 50% higher than that of the rest of China. In an effort to tackle their pollution problem, China's government is taking matters into their own hands. China was dissatisfied with the half-hearted enforcement of existing regulations to limit the percentage of contamination in bales. Thus, in February 2013, China started conducting intensive inspections on all imported waste to check for high levels of contamination. This was known as Operation Green Fence. It was the first step in China's plans to tackle its foreign plastic waste problem. Once the inspections started in China, tons of recyclables were sent back to their countries of origin as they simply did not meet China's new standards. This led to severe confusion worldwide among key players in the recycling market, especially among exporters. Despite this major change in China's policy of accepting international waste, it got little to no coverage from mainstream media. In early 2017, China expanded their campaign with an initiative known as National Sword. It entailed stricter checks on imported materials, tightening the rules for compliance on waste import regulations, cracking down on illegal smuggling of recyclable and waste materials. Within the first few weeks of this initiative, the Chinese authorities arrested 90 suspects for permit fraud. Furthermore, they confiscated 22,100 metric tons of foreign scrap material. Intensive facility inspections revealed that 590 out of the 900 plastic import facilities had violated the newly enforced guidelines. Those charged with violations found that their applications for import permits were being suspended for at least a year. By September 2017, thousands of recyclable import facilities weren't able to get their permits renewed. Things are only going to get tougher. By the end of 2019, China will no longer accept 56 types of solid waste, including PET and PVC plastic, scrapped cars, ships, and stainless steel, mixed waste paper, and various textiles. As a result of the National Sword initiative, most of the world saw a sharp decline in recyclable shipments to China. Mountains of recyclables piled up at MRFs worldwide. Many parts of the world cut back on what materials they would recycle. Meanwhile, other regions resorted to halting their curbside pickups and recycling services altogether. Australia, for example, resorted to dumping much of their recyclables into landfills. The UK, on the other hand, stockpiled their recycling material. Out of desperation, many countries decided to turn to other Asian recycling importers. However, Thailand, Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia lacked China's ability to process the sheer volume of waste the world produced. Initially, many of these other countries resorted to secretly dumping enormous piles of waste into landfills, as well as the ocean. The scale of these illegal dumpings cannot be overstated. However, after a few public scandals, these countries simply stopped importing the rest of the world's recyclables. Given China's struggle with extreme pollution, they are totally justified to enforce strict standards on what sort of garbage they're willing to import. The fact that it severely impacted so many other countries only goes to show how our current recycling system was never sustainable. A Sky News correspondent spoke to Lee Clayton, Managing Director of Mono World Recycling. Mr. Clayton was asked whether he knew what becomes of the materials they send overseas for processing. This is what he had to say.
No, we don't. We don't know whether it's burnt, buried, or just left on the side of the street.
Most countries did not invest enough in their own recycling facilities. Instead, they exported their problem to China, essentially saying, out of sight, out of mind. Now, they're unable to process even a fraction of the trash their own population produces. The final result is that most of what we send off to recycle actually just ends up getting dumped, burned, or discarded into the ocean. It's not all doom and gloom though. In a strange turn of events, Chinese firms have opened up many of their own facilities in various parts of the world, including the USA. This means in a not too distant future, it might be the West that's importing Chinese recyclables. In my next video, I will be covering various effective strategies that different regions rely upon for recycling domestically. If you found this video to be informative, please give it a like. If you want more content like this, please subscribe and ding the bell. It's been Fatally Honest. Ciao.